Let's talk a little bit about the ACC specifically. There's been speculation. I know you guys have talked about this. There were people in the comments on the live stream asking about USF, Memphis, Tulane coming into the ACC. And I don't mean this sarcastically. I live in Tampa, Florida, and I'm going to a USF event in 2 weeks. So I'm really not talking. Actually, I'm going to two in 2 weeks. So I'm really not talking smack about them. But like, how much does that move the needle? Like, are those programs that in 5 or 6 years you think could be on, what kind of level could those programs be on to in the ACC? What are your thoughts on those three teams specifically? Anybody else you want to mention? Maybe two. Like, how much does that move the needle?
I know. Why don't you start with USF? Because I know that's one that you said pretty emphatically several times that if you were the ACC, you'd be looking hard at USF right now. And TJ brought up USF, so let's start with that one.
Yeah, I'll start with USF, and then I'll let JY talk about some other potential targets. So first of all, USF, you're right there, like you said. The thing is for and you're a Florida State guy. Your focus a lot is on Florida State. So I would say, if you're a current fan of an ACC program, it's hard to think of, can we really replace a program like Florida State with USF? No, they're never going to replace them. It's like, whoever follows a legend, you just can't do it. I mean, Florida State, since they've entered the ACC, I think in 1990 or so, I was a kid. They have dominated the ACC for that entire time. They are a huge. I would say Florida, with the size of that state, has two flagship universities, University of Florida and Florida State, and USF is not on that level. However, this is about maintaining survivability for the future. And for me, USF, they're a growing program. They're investing. They are it's a great way to stay in the state of Florida if you're worried about losing Florida State and potentially Miami. And we talked about that. Could Florida State go to the SEC? Could Miami go to the Big Ten? And now, the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, is shut out of the state of Florida. That would be really rough. So it's a way to stay in the state of Florida, maintain survivability. And I think USF is a big growth opportunity school. It's not a dying Rust Belt school, up north. It is a growing place. It's, you got to stay in Florida. You got to have a growth opportunity. It's a place that they're investing. So is it a 1-for-1 swap for Florida State? Obviously not. I mean, there's no way. But if the ACC loses a few schools, there's no way they're going to replace them 1-for-1 value. But if they can bring in a few targets that, again, have that growth potential and maintain the viability of the conference, basically keep ESPN paying the bills, that's a win for them. I mean, it just is. And that's the world we live in, where the Big Ten and the SEC are going to eat and everybody else has to kind of scramble for scraps. And I think, the ACC is in a good position. I mean, yes, a year ago we said, are these lawsuits an existential threat to the conference? At this point, with the additions they made, I think that they've ensured their survivability. And if they lose more schools, they have these great opportunities to bring it in and at least plug the holes in the dam.
Yeah. Well, and I'll add, you mentioned Memphis and Tulane as well. And I think Steve hit the nail on the head that we're not talking about replacements. We're talking about replacing losses. We're talking about the sustainability of a conference. So by no means is any group of 6 school going to be able to fill the hole left by another power member that maybe goes to the power 2, like we're talking about. So that absolutely won't happen. And as we, where we sit today, I think Memphis and Tulane, they've always been, they're kind of the hot schools right now. The Pac kind of talks about them. The potential new ACC might want them. And so, it's always good to be wanted. And I talk about this with Texas State right now. They're kind of wanted possibly from a couple of the Western conferences. So, they're kind of sitting in the driver's seat. Now they got to wait and see if something happens with the ACC to see if, they get an opening there. But it's always good to be wanted. And they certainly seem like they're wanted from a bunch of different angles. But I would just say, while that may be true today, and I think it is true today, those are probably the top 3. You could probably make an argument for 1 or 2 more. Steve mentioned a couple other universities here. Like if we're talking 2030, 2031 here, another 5, 6, 7 years, depending on, what holes they're looking to fill, because the media partner is going to have a say in this as well. They're going to have a huge say in this. So I think the Florida piece is huge, thus the reason for USF. But maybe some other areas, if UNC, and we kind of have tied UNC and NC State together because of some of the politics and things going on in the state of North Carolina. If they lose both of those schools, the ACC, I'm saying, they're going to want to add a school in North Carolina. Again, just as you want to say, wow, can you imagine the ACC not having a university in Florida? Can you imagine them losing UNC and NC State in the state of North Carolina? That is their home base. That's their headquarters. Yeah. So would they look at, and this is down the road. I can't tell you this is or isn't, but Steve, mentioned a few, like an East Carolina, an ECU, possibly a JMU at that point. Now I know that's not North Carolina, that's Virginia. Appy State. Yeah. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in the next 5 years. My goodness, look at what JMU did here in just a short amount of time. So I think as we sit here today, you nailed the top three. They seem to be wanted, or at least have interest from a lot of different potential conferences. But in 5 years, it could change. And again, the media partners are the ones that are going to kind of tell conferences where they see holes and where they kind of would like to grow that conference.
And I think the biggest thing to remember, if I could just add one last point, is those conferences, again, specifically we'll talk about the ACC, they're never going to catch up to basically where they were, at the height of their power. They're never going to catch up to the SEC. They're never going to catch up to the Big Ten. And I think probably most ACC fans have realized that. Probably Florida State fans realized that first, and that's why they wanted to get out. So again, for the ACC, it's not about catching up to the big ones. It's not even about keeping what they have. It's just basically, I think, if we see these moves play out, it's going to be about surviving.
Hey, if you're enjoying our video with Steve and JY from the Big Mountain Podcast, I'm going to throw this entire episode up on our audio platform. If you don't want to watch all 5 individual videos, if you don't want to wait for them, make sure that you subscribe at Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. The link to that is in the description if you want to hear the rest of the convo. Appreciate you guys. Now back to the interview. Yeah. If we do this for like 6 or 7 more years as a graduate of the prestigious Liberty University, I need you guys to start mentioning Liberty and speak that into the ether. Just start mentioning it. Like the BYU thing is working out really well for the Big 12. Their numbers, like Church of Latter-day Saint, like Liberty's got a pretty big alumni base too. Like let's add Liberty to the ACC and I'll become an ACC fan again. What is the when I think about at one point we thought, oh man, we could have these 7 or 8 team Magnificent 7 at one point, right? Like vote this conference out and it would just cease to exist and all these brands would scatter. Obviously don't expect that at all. But if a Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina and NC State tied to them, a Miami, UVA is kind of gray, right? Like where could they jump into it? They've got some politics there too with Tech, but are there, should the ACC be worried long-term about, the Big 12 trying to poach schools like Louisville and, I just mentioned Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh and things like that? Like, not that I'm not trying to paint the picture of the ACC is about to crater, but if Florida State gets out in 2030, 2031 and UNC gets out, and Miami goes to the Big 10 and all these things happen, could that be where the ACC could be in trouble because conferences go after some of the other mid-tier programs like a Louisville, like a Pitt, like a Virginia Tech?
I personally don't think so anymore. I think there was a point, if we were having the same conversation, 15 months ago. I think yes, there was danger, red alert. They made some moves to consolidate, but they had some things go their way, and a big part of that is we talked about politics. Because for that to happen, you need a whole group of 7 schools to be on the same page and make a power move, make a boss move from one, which we saw years ago when the Big East collapsed and we saw in the Pac collapse, a whole group of schools leaving at one time. The problem with the ACC, whether I don't know if you call it a problem or a good thing from their survivability standpoint, is you have the politics in some of these states. North Carolina is a big part. If when FSU lawsuit comes down, Clemson lawsuit comes down, if the next domino would have been the University of North Carolina also suing to leave the ACC, there might not be an ACC today, as we speak, if that would have happened. But the politics involved in the state of North Carolina, JY and I have covered that on the Big Mountain extensively. The basically UNC does not control their own fate. There's a large, is it the Board of Regents in North Carolina? I think it's called. They control basically all the public schools and universities in that state, and they want to make sure all of the schools are taken care of. And really, the politicians there, they would rather see their school stay in the ACC. Now, we saw some politics happen in the state of Texas with Texas A&M in Texas, and eventually the people writing the big checks got their way, and the University of Texas came to the SEC. So you may see something like that eventually. But the thing is in order for that big program, which is UNC, to leave and get out, whether it's to go to the Big Ten or go to the SEC, they're probably going to have to bring NC State with them, just because of the political landscape in there. And I can tell you from the Big Ten's perspective, that is a non-starter. It's a no-go. It's never going to happen. Could that happen for the SEC? Maybe, especially if ESPN's willing to pony up the money for that. So I think, again, the combination of some of the moves they made, some of the additions, and really what they have lined up here. And now the third thing is, it looks, the ESPN is continuing this contract. Those three things have really ensured, in my opinion, the viability of the ACC going forward. Could the Big 12 and the ACC fight over a couple schools? You mentioned Louisville. If ACC loses Florida State and Miami, maybe they start looking at trying to get UCF, back in the fold over. Who knows? Could they fight over and squabble? I look at them as two peers, and it's very possible that, they might bite at each other's heels a little bit, nip at the edges. Pittsburgh is another school that I've heard mentioned, that the Big 12 might have interest in because they can get into. Pennsylvania, they have some natural rivalries that are over in the Big 12. But I don't see the only conferences that are able to deal those death blows right now are the Big Ten and the SEC. The Big 12 is not going to deal, in my opinion, not going to deal a death blow to the ACC. Maybe they steal a school or two, but I think the ACC survives. They've got this contract extended, and I think basically they've already have the replacements lined up. So I don't see it. That's just my opinion. That's speculation. I'm sure a lot of Florida State fans would want to push, blow the whole thing up right now, tomorrow, and so they can do what they want to do.
And I'll agree with Steve. I don't see it happening. And it comes down to membership. I don't see the majority of members doing that. And, different conferences are made up differently. I think some require, a 50% or just over 50% vote. Some are a 2/3 vote in order to dissolve. It would have to be a dissolution, I think, vote in order for that to happen. And I'm not sure there's enough votes to have that happen in the ACC or any conference as we stand here today. And to Steve's point, I think they definitely have solidified their survival for the foreseeable future. I don't think there's any risk to that. Maybe onesie twosies, can always happen, but not the whole thing. The only other thing I would just put out there, we're not a Big 12 or an ACC channel to any sort of degree, other than we've been following the ACC lawsuits. Steve's coming at this from his knowledge of the Big 10. I would just say, maybe there's probably, instead of the Big 12, getting the ACC to collapse, possibly a merger type of situation going on. I've seen that come up several times. By no means am I saying that's going to happen. But, not only do you have to eat somebody, you could be like, hey, let's join together and get along and try to close that gap against with the power too. I don't think that's likely in any way, but another option for those two conferences.
Yeah. And if I could add, TJ, one last possibility, because 99%, I think 10 years from now, ACC is still going strong. They lose a couple, 2 or 3 of their top members, but they're still alive. They're still eating well. But one scenario, the one wild card, the biggest wild card there is in college football, University of Notre Dame. If the University of Notre Dame were at some point to say, okay, we want to join the Big Ten or we want to join the SEC, whatever, and they had a list of programs they wanted to bring with them, I think that would be enough, potentially be enough, especially if you got a media partner involved. If ABC, ESPN all of a sudden had a chance to bring in Notre Dame under their ecosystem into the SEC, or if the Big Ten was bringing them in, and you got Fox, ABC, Fox, CBS, and NBC to put a whole bunch of money together, and Notre Dame says the only way we're coming is we bring 5 of our closest friends with us. Then that's a scenario where you could really, and again, that's basically the Big Ten or the SEC dealing that death blow. I think we're beyond the point. A lot of people say, well, the Big 12 crumbled the Pac. I don't really think that's the way to look at it, because none of that happens if the Big Ten didn't come in and take the top market out of the Pac. The Pac without the LA market it was basically a shell of itself. So they created that death blow to the Pac. It's just the Pac's corpse stumbled around for another year. It really, in my opinion, takes the Big Ten or the SEC to deal that death blow. And I don't think either conference really has the appetite to do that right now. They may just want to nibble at the top, give the ACC a haircut, but they're not looking to take them out and put them underwater.
Yeah, guys, you guys have been great. I appreciate you guys so much for your time. We went a little over tonight, but tell us a little bit about the Big Mountain Podcast, where people can follow you, where can find your work, and all the things that you guys do.
Yeah, so the main channel's Big Mountain Podcast on YouTube. Started about 1.5 years ago, so we're not on any of those streaming platforms yet in terms of Spotify or anything like that. Try to get there. But you can catch us on YouTube. We drop 3 or 4 times a week. We do live episodes Wednesday evenings, 8:30 Eastern. Love to have people join us. And I will say you're probably the first person that took notes, TJ. So I'm going to give you that award. It sounds good. So that's you. We're both on X as well. So at TBM_JY and at TBM_Steve. You can follow us on there. I'm pretty active right now with the whole Pac and Mountain West and just Western football in general. I'm the Western guy. Steve's more of the Big Ten Eastern guy. We like to think that's what makes us a pretty good channel.
And if I could just add, we focus on the Big Ten and the Mountain West. I think the one of the things that makes us unique is we're 2 regular guys. We don't work in the media. Both of us work kind of in the intersection of where kind of government and education intersect. So it gives us a unique background because we cover expansion, conference realignment and expansion and these lawsuits all across the country, not just in the Big Ten and Mountain West.
Right.
I think we have a unique perspective on these lawsuits, on how the things work. And we really like to do deep dives into the lawsuits, into the realignment issues, and look past because I think most fans just kind of look at this team is good at football, so they need to move to this conference. It doesn't work that way. It's not as simple. There's so many things behind the scenes with the law, with government, with the power players that write the checks. And we really like to look at that and kind of dig a little deeper than just the headlines at the surface.
And I want to thank you, TJ, for having us on here. Really appreciate the invite.
Yeah.
No, you guys are awesome. I really enjoy, your content. I think you guys have really good conversations. It's so natural. I enjoy tuning in, so we will certainly link all of that stuff in the description because more people need to go check it out. This is a newer channel that I started about 1 year ago, but we have a lot of Big Ten fans, and so hopefully they're going and checking you out. But for the ACC folks that tune in, SEC, whatever, it is really interesting. And we touched on several different things tonight, and I feel like mentioned just about every conference under the sun when doing it. So no, it is really good stuff, and I appreciate you guys.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I appreciate the Big Mountain Podcast, both Steve and JY, for jumping on to chat with us tonight. I'm going to link both their social medias and their YouTube channel in the description. Make sure that you go check them out. They do phenomenal work. I wouldn't bring just anybody on this channel. I promise you that. Steve and JY, the Big Mountain Podcast. Make sure that you go check them out. If you're not already subscribed to College Football Addiction, we have done 5 total segments with them on Conference Realignment, breaking down every angle of it, from the Big Ten to the SEC to ESPN, UNC, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, all of it. Make sure you're subscribed here so that you don't miss any of it.